The readings this week invite us to reflect on what true leadership looks like. And it's not always what we expect. As we'll see, the readings highlight shepherds and servants, women who defy the norms of their time, and leaders who focus on lasting solutions rather than quick fixes. They challenge us to think about how we empower those unique voices and those creative problem solvers who genuinely feel called to lead. Welcome to Mythologizing the Bible, where we'll be taking a look at 3 readings from the Christian Bible through the lens of sacred myth. As we reflect on the readings for the 4th Sunday in Advent, we're going to look beyond the traditional Christian narrative to uncover a few lessons that should resonate with all of us, regardless of our religious background or lack thereof. In this episode, we'll explore why leadership is about more than authority. It's about service, authenticity, and lifting up others. And we'll ask some tough questions. Why do so many systems still favor the powerful over the marginalized? What can we do to break the cycle of exclusion? The lessons we'll uncover in these ancient stories are surprisingly relevant to our lives today. Whether you're looking for inspiration in your own leadership or wondering how to support someone stepping into their calling, this episode will leave you with plenty to think about, and maybe a new perspective or two. So grab a comfy seat, a glass of your favorite beverage, and let's look at some ancient stories together in this edition of Mythologizing the Bible, where we'll be exploring the readings for the 4th Sunday in Advent, Cycle C of the Roman Catholic Lectionary. In this series, we're exploring readings from the Bible through the lens of sacred myth, looking for interpretations and lessons that don't demand a belief in the supernatural. What that means from a practical standpoint is that we will assume that these stories and writings are fiction, written by pre-scientific people who were just trying to make sense of the universe. Now, you might agree with the lessons I find, but I encourage you to look for something that rings true to you. Part of the beauty of understanding these writings as sacred myths is that we're free to interpret them for ourselves. We're free to learn the lessons that we need right now. So with that, let's dive in. As I said, tonight we'll be looking at the readings for the 4th Sunday in Advent, Cycle C. Our first reading is from Micah. It's chapter 5, verses 1 through 4a. Our second reading is from the letter to the Hebrews. It's chapter 10, verses 5 through 10. And our gospel reading is from Luke. It's chapter 1, verses 39 through 45. Now, we'll start by going through all 3 of the readings, then we'll look for the messages and the main lesson in each one. Finally, we'll bring everything together, look at what it means for us today, and talk about where we go from here. And with that, let's begin. Our first reading is from Micah. Thus says the Lord, marshal your troops now, city of troops, for a siege is laid against us. They will strike Israel's ruler on the cheek with a rod. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. Therefore Israel will be abandoned until the time when she who is in labor bears a son, and the rest of his brothers return to join the Israelites. He will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. Our second reading is from the letter to the Hebrews. Brothers and sisters, therefore, when Christ came into the world, he said, sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but a body you prepared for me. With burnt offerings and sin offerings you were not pleased. Then I said, here I am. It is written about me in the scroll. I have come to do your will, my God. First he said, sacrifices and offerings, burnt offerings and sin offerings you did not desire, nor were you pleased with them, though they were offered in accordance with the law. Then he said, here I am, I have come to do your will. He sets aside the first to establish the second, and by that will we have been made holy through the sacrifice of the body of Jesus Christ once for all. And the gospel reading is from Luke. At that time, Mary got ready and hurried to a town in the hill country of Judea, where she entered Zechariah's home and greeted Elizabeth. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. In a loud voice she exclaimed, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. But why am I so favored, that the mother of my Lord should come to me? As soon as the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy. Blessed is she who has believed that the Lord would fulfill his promises to her." All right, so let's go back and take a critical look now at these readings and see what learnings and lessons we can find if we dig around just a little bit. So our first reading was from Micah. And in this reading, Micah's prophecy, it paints a vivid picture of hope for a suffering people. Micah himself came from a poor rural background. He wasn't part of the elite circles in Jerusalem. This probably made his words about a shepherd king from Bethlehem even more moving or touching. Bethlehem, a small and seemingly insignificant town, is spotlighted as the birthplace of a new leader, someone who would rise above the corruption and failures of the existing rulers in Jerusalem. But Micah's choice to emphasize the little guy isn't all that unique. It reflects a recurring pattern in the more natural and human stories of the Bible, as well as countless stories and myths from other cultures, times, and even belief systems. And that pattern is that leaders can emerge from the most unexpected places. While this prophecy was mythologized in the Gospels to align with Jesus' origins, or supposed origins, its universal truth is still really clear. True leadership doesn't depend on status or privilege. Micah's message wasn't just comforting, though. It was also a challenge. By highlighting the humble origins of this future leader, he was sending an implicit warning to the powerful that they're not invincible. This theme runs deep in the prophetic literature, where the smallest and most unassuming characters are often depicted as those who will ultimately prevail. It's easy to see why. Prophets who were often marginalized themselves, well, they wanted to inspire people to believe in the possibility of change and accountability. I mean, even today, we celebrate underdog stories because they remind us that genuine leadership comes from values, from vision, and a willingness to serve, not from titles or wealth. Frankly, that's why every true Christian, if they believe their Bible, should be opposed to so-called leaders like Donald Trump. Anyway, stripping away the supernatural elements, Micah's prophecy becomes more of a timeless call to action. It's not about divine intervention, but about recognizing that anyone, no matter their background, can step up and lead. The idea of a shepherd king symbolizes a leader who cares for their people, putting their needs first and guiding with compassion, whether it's in our communities, our workplaces, or even our families. We all have the potential to answer a similar call. Leadership isn't about being perfect or being powerful. It's about being willing to stand up and do what's right. So the main lesson I got from our first reading is that anyone genuinely following the call to leadership can succeed. Micah's words remind us that true leadership isn't about where you come from. It's about your willingness to answer the call and serve. Whether you're a shepherd in a field or someone facing challenges today, the opportunity to lead is within your reach, and anyone genuinely following the call to leadership can succeed. Our second reading was from the letter to the Hebrews. And this reading draws a stark contrast between temporary fixes and lasting solutions. In the context of the verses we read, the priests' continual sacrifices symbolize short-term measures, rituals that had to be repeated endlessly without ever solving the underlying problem. Now, contrast that with the birth of Jesus, as framed in Christian mythology, which represents the start of a definitive solution. Right? For Christians, Advent is meaningful because it marks the beginning of this final answer to the problem of sin. Stripping away that supernatural framework, what we see is an emphasis on the value of addressing root causes rather than endlessly patching over the symptoms. That's a lesson that definitely transcends theology and applies to leadership, problem solving, and our everyday lives. The priests' sacrifices were about maintaining the status quo. It wasn't about driving change. Leaders today can, I think, fall into the same trap, focusing on temporary patches to avoid conflict or delay hard decisions. True leadership, however, requires the courage to identify and tackle the root causes of issues, even if the process is difficult or unpopular. Think about systemic challenges like poverty, climate change, or even workplace dysfunction. Addressing those problems at their source often takes more time and effort. It almost always takes more time and effort up front, but it leads to meaningful, lasting solutions. Good leaders don't manage problems, they solve them. But this idea isn't just for leaders. It's something we can all apply in our lives. How often do we put off addressing the deeper issues in our relationships or our jobs or in our communities? How often do we opt for quick fixes that they're just easier up front, but they don't really last? Facing challenges head on and finding long-term solutions takes intentionality and effort. But the rewards can be exponential. Just as the story of Jesus in Hebrews highlights the idea of a permanent solution, we too can strive to resolve issues in ways that build a stronger foundation for the future. So the main lesson I got from our second reading is that the best leaders look for permanent solutions. This passage from Hebrews reminds us that meaningful change requires us to move beyond temporary fixes and to work on solutions that will last. Whether we're talking about leadership, relationships, or personal growth, addressing the root cause is the only way to create true and lasting progress. That's why the best leaders look for permanent solutions. Okay, our final reading was from the Gospel of Luke. And this reading offers what I hope you recognize as a really rare and powerful moment in Scripture. A scene focused entirely on women. Mary visits Elizabeth, both of whom play pivotal roles in the Christian narrative. And this encounter is framed as a moment of recognition and affirmation. Elizabeth greets Mary with profound respect and joy, acknowledging the significance of Mary's role in this unfolding story. Well, the story is, it is absolutely dripping with supernatural elements, but the deeper human message still shines through. Women supporting and empowering each other. Luke, a gospel that does often downplay the patriarchy, is clearly choosing to highlight women as central figures, illustrating that leadership and wisdom, They aren't bound by gender or societal status. The Catholic tradition refers to women like Mary and Elizabeth as wisdom women, figures of strength, guidance, and insight. Unfortunately, modern Catholic institutions often fail to uphold this legacy. Instead, they've chosen to basically marginalize the very voices that have historically been sources of wisdom and leadership. What makes this story timeless is its emphasis on women recognizing each other's power and each other's potential. In Elizabeth's blessing of Mary, which is the basis for the Catholic Hail Mary prayer, we see an example of leadership as encouragement and affirmation. It's a stark contrast to the competitive, hierarchical models that we tend to glorify today. This lesson, though, remains relevant. Leadership isn't about dominating others. It's about lifting them up. But I don't think this story is just about women. I think it's about anyone whose leadership potential has been overlooked or dismissed because of societal biases. Mary and Elizabeth remind us that true leadership can come from unexpected places. That's why this story can be seen as a call to celebrate and support marginalized voices. Not out of pity, but because those voices carry unique wisdom and insight that can enrich all of us. Whether in families, workplaces, or communities, we have the opportunity to empower others and be empowered ourselves. Leadership, at its core, is about confidence, about conviction, and the courage to support others on our journey. So the main lesson I got from our gospel reading is that women and other marginalized people can be tremendous leaders. The meeting of Mary and Elizabeth offers a timeless reminder that leadership is not confined to titles, positions, or privilege. It's about recognizing and encouraging the potential in others, especially those who have been sidelined by society. By empowering and supporting one another, we can create a world where everyone's wisdom and strength are valued. It should not come as a shock when I insist that women and other marginalized people can be tremendous leaders. All right, let's review the lessons we've talked about so far. In our first reading from Micah, the main lesson I came away with was, anyone genuinely following the call to leadership can succeed. In our second reading from Hebrews, the main lesson I got was, the best leaders look for permanent solutions. And finally, the main lesson I got from our gospel reading was, women and other marginalized people can be tremendous leaders. Leadership isn't about privilege or power. It's about answering the call to serve, no matter who you are or where you come from. This week's readings remind us that the best leaders aren't afraid to do the hard work of creating lasting solutions, and that true leadership often comes from those whom society overlooks. Whether it's Mary and Elizabeth supporting each other, a shepherd rising to meet the needs of the people, or someone stepping forward to solve a deep-rooted problem, the message is clear. Leadership thrives when we empower unique voices and embrace bold, compassionate action. By recognizing potential in those who are willing to lead with integrity, and by giving them the support they need to succeed, we can build a future shaped by strength, inclusion, and lasting change. Let's commit to lifting up those who answer the call, because leadership belongs to anyone willing to do the work, and together we can help them succeed. So let's step back and take another look at these readings overall and ask ourselves if we can figure out what these messages really mean to us in our daily lives. To do this, I'll try to answer two questions. So what And now what? Okay, so what? Why should we care about any of this? Well, we should care about this because it's important to talk about leadership. Who gets to lead, how they get there, and why we accept it. Too often, we're stuck with leaders who gained power because of their wealth, their connections, or because they're part of some exclusive good old boy network. But here's the thing. Real leadership isn't about privilege. It's about service. So why do we settle for the wrong kind of leaders? And more importantly, how do we change that? This is important because too often we see people rise to leadership because of their bank accounts or family connections. And it's everywhere, in politics, corporations, and yes, even in religious organizations like the Catholic Church. Yet leadership is supposed to be about serving others, not serving yourself. We need to stop equating privilege with competence. We need to start looking for people who genuinely feel called to serve. We should care about this because when you see an organization without women in leadership roles at every level, something is deeply wrong. Whether it's the Catholic Church, corporate boardrooms, or even government organizations, the lack of women in leadership isn't just a coincidence. It's a symptom of a system that favors patriarchy over progress. We need to start questioning why this happens, and we need to start demanding change. This is important because this is a vicious cycle. Misogynistic, patriarchal elites hold on to power by choosing people just like themselves to follow in their footsteps. It's not about finding the best leaders, it's about protecting their own interests. This is why the same old power structures continue to dominate. If we want to break the cycle, we need to stop letting the insiders call all the shots. And we need to start elevating voices from the outside, but elevating those outside voices that bring fresh perspectives and creative solutions. We should care about this because if we want better leadership, we have to do the hard work of identifying and empowering people who bring unique, creative, and diverse perspectives to the table. These aren't the people who are usually invited into the inner circle, but they're exactly the people we need. By supporting those who are willing to lead with integrity and truly are focused on serving others, we can build organizations, heck, we can build a world that reflects the values we actually believe in. We should care about this because the quality of leadership shapes everything, our workplaces, our communities, our world. And if we keep accepting the status quo, we'll keep getting the same broken results. But by challenging the systems that perpetuate inequality and elitism, by lifting up marginalized voices, and by choosing to follow leaders who serve with compassion and integrity, we can create real, lasting change. So let's start asking the tough questions, and let's start doing the hard work. Our future depends on it. And the last question I try to answer is, now what? What are we supposed to do? Where do we go from here? Well, the fact is that leadership matters more than we often realize. From the people we elect to govern us to the leaders in our workplaces, in our communities, even in our places of worship, if that's your thing. Leadership shapes our lives. As I've said, identifying and empowering genuine servant leaders and breaking the cycle of elitism, patriarchy, and privilege, well, that's important. But before we can do that on a larger scale, we actually need to start examining the leaders we currently follow. And we need to think critically about why we follow them. With that in mind, here's your question for the week. Who are the leaders you admire, And why do you follow them? This question is essential because it helps you reflect on the values and qualities you prioritize in leadership and whether those values align with what you truly believe in. Are you drawn to leaders because of their charisma, their position of authority, or their ability to serve others with integrity and compassion? Taking time to identify what you admire in leaders can clarify your own values and guide your decisions, whether it's voting in an election, choosing a mentor, or supporting a community leader. About 20 years ago, I was working for a large automotive parts manufacturing company, and I moved into a new position negotiating and managing indirect material contracts. I won't bore you with all the details, but it ended up being a lot different than the IT purchasing that I had been doing before. Some of the skills were transferable, but not all, and not necessarily the ones I assumed would be the most important. My new boss at the time ended up being in the same boat, but for different reasons. He had just come out of an engineering team that was attached to a factory, and we found ourselves trying to buy indirect materials for over 70 factories in the U.S. and Mexico. And we weren't experts at it, and in some cases barely knew what to do. What my new boss did, though, was something I didn't expect. He didn't come in and act like he knew everything. He didn't start using his authority to shake things up and change things, generally so that it would be more like something he was used to from prior jobs. No, instead, he came in and started asking good questions and then listened. He listened a lot. Unlike so many other managers I'd worked for, he didn't listen just long enough to think he understood. He listened carefully. And then he asked more questions. And then he listened more. He paid attention to the team members who'd been doing these jobs for a long time. He listened to the things they liked and the things they didn't. He asked for data to back up any claims that they made. And he was very systematic in how he went about learning the job and involving the entire team in eventually developing a vision for the future. But even that took time. During the first couple months, he spent a lot of time just removing roadblocks from team members because he listened to them and heard what they needed. Removed roadblocks so they could get their jobs done. Guess what? That was one of the ways he began identifying ideas for process improvements and for increased efficiencies. I found myself modeling his behavior, and less than a year later, we had both become basically experts in a number of critical areas, and we'd launched a massive campaign to renegotiate over $100 million in indirect material contracts in the U.S. factories we covered. It was an incredibly ambitious plan, and it ended up being incredibly successful because of his leadership. Now, I have continued to use that same general leadership style, and it hasn't failed me yet, 20 years later. Sure, I've learned plenty of my own lessons along the way, and I've developed my own unique style, but many of the core things I do can be traced back to my time on that team. So what about you? Who are the leaders you admire, and why do you follow them? By answering this question, I'm hoping you'll gain some insight into how your choices as a follower shape the kind of leadership you see in the world. Ultimately, this reflection isn't just about analyzing others. It's about challenging yourself to support and empower the right kind of leaders, and maybe even to embody some of those qualities in your own life. It's about recognizing that leadership isn't just about those at the top. It really is about all of us. Well, before I wrap things up, I'd like to leave you with one more thought. Author and motivational speaker Simon Sinek says that leadership is not about being in charge. It is about taking care of those in your charge. When we think about leadership, it's easy to focus on authority, titles, or how much influence someone holds. But Simon Sinek's words remind us of the true essence of leadership. It's about service. A good leader doesn't just command. A good leader cares. They don't just instruct. They inspire. Leadership, at its core, is about taking care of people. It's about empowering them to grow. And it's about ensuring their well-being. This quote is a perfect fit for the question we just discussed. When we reflect on the leaders we admire and why we follow them, it's worth asking, do they genuinely take care of those in their charge? Or are they simply focused on maintaining power and control? True leadership is about more than wielding authority. It's about fostering trust, compassion, and accountability. In answering the question for the week, Simon Sinek's insight offers a clear benchmark. If the leaders we follow don't reflect care and responsibility in their actions, why are we following them? And if we're in positions of leadership, how can we ensure that we're living up to this idea? By embracing this perspective, we can better identify and support the kinds of leaders who make a meaningful difference in our communities and our lives. All right, we've come to the end of this episode. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back again next week, but in the meantime, I encourage you to engage with our question for the week and pay attention to the important lessons you come across wherever you find them. You'll create a more purposeful and joyful life, and you'll start to feel more connected to the world and the people around you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mythologizing the Bible as we did a deeper dive into the readings for the fourth Sunday in Advent, Cycle C of the Roman Catholic Lectionary. Remember that leadership belongs to anyone willing to do the work, and together we can help them succeed. The Bible readings used for this episode are from the Holy Bible New International Version, NIV, copyright 1973, 1978, 1984, and 2011 by Biblica Inc., used by permission, all rights reserved worldwide. Thank you for listening. If you like this content, please consider telling a friend about it. The more people who hear the positive messages I'm sharing, the better. Mythologizing the Bible is also a live webinar series held every Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find it at twitch.tv/thecodaproject. Every Friday, the audio of these Mythologizing the Bible presentations is released as a podcast. You can find both the podcast and the video versions at thecodaproject.com. CODA stands for Creating Our Divine Alignment. When we learn to align our words and actions with core values, that alignment feels absolutely exquisite. It feels divine. But it's a divine alignment that doesn't require belief in the supernatural. It's a divine alignment we have the ability to create for ourselves. To learn more, to subscribe to my mailing list, and to keep up on everything I'm doing with the Coda Project, please visit thecodaproject.com.